As if it had not been enough last month to announce the failure of the government in Great Britain, France is now following. French President Emmanuel Macron also dissolved the parliament in France. Here it was preceded by large losses of votes by his own party and student protests, which have become more frequent in recent months. However, Macron has always been exposed to various criticisms, not least because of the reforms that have been initiated in the country. The decisive point for the dissolution of parliament, however, was the defeat in the European elections on June 20th. "You can't pretend that nothing happened," Macron is quoted. The parliamentary elections will now take place in July, just as quickly as in Great Britain. Some critics are already talking about an unstable Europe that cannot actually afford such a thing in the current world situation. In both countries, it will be exciting to see who wins the race, and we will report on it next month. We are receiving good news from the Europa mission. After there had been problems with communication last month, radio contact could now be restored. Although it still takes several minutes for a radio signal to reach the Shango, communication was back in order. The solar storms last month were to blame for the failure of communication, as they interrupted radio contact. Now that these have subsided, everything is back on track. The Shango crew is doing well, astronaut Lee Das-Hel confirmed, and everything is running normally. The Shango itself is located between the Moon and Mars, and will be for a while. Meanwhile, Sean Christopher's Saturn mission reports a delayed arrival. Originally, the landing on Titan was expected as early as this month. However, Colonel Christopher's ship had to brake several times to repair minor damage that had occurred during the flight. As a result, the arrival will be delayed by 81 days and is now in September or October. This is also nothing unusual and no cause for concern. Compared to NASA's previous space missions, everything is running flawlessly on both the Europa and Saturn missions. By the way, the Chinese probe Chang'e 6 has collected soil samples from the far side of the Moon, and is already back on Earth. The pressure on incumbent President Joe Biden is growing. Biden had already attracted attention several times in the past due to dropouts. So he didn't know some things or pronounced them incorrectly. His rival for the office of the new president, Donald Trump, had taken up this and made it an aspect of his own election campaign. Now voices have been raised again that Biden should renounce the presidential candidacy and make way for someone else. But what had happened? This time, the trigger was Biden's weak performance in the duel against Donald Trump on June 27. In addition to the almost obligatory slips of the tongue, Biden also seemed to lack energy. So he made an exhausted impression, which could not exactly be said of his challenger Trump. Overall, the duel did not exactly help to reduce Biden's reputation as a tattery old man. The truth of the arguments made in the debate shouldn't be discussed here. Many voters in the US are dissatisfied with both candidates and wish for alternative candidates.